Sure. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Montgomery County Food Council SNAP Ambassador Training. We are very excited to see the tremendous interest that this training has generated, and we thank you all for being here today to learn how you can help educate Montgomery County residents on accessing SNAP benefits. Before we begin, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping items. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name and your organization. Please make sure you are muted to avoid extra noise on the line. We will definitely be sending a copy of the slides to everyone who registered, along with a link to the recording and additional reference material. And we have purposely left a lot of time at the end of this training for your questions. So please, hold your questions if you would like to the end. If you have a question that comes up during the presentation, you can also feel free to put it in the chat. We can try to get to it during the presentation. If not, we will definitely be getting to it at the end. And with that, we will get started. Just to introduce you to the SNAP outreach team here at the Montgomery County Food Council. My name is Allison Schnitzer. I am the program director. I am joined today by Elizabeth Tuin, who is our senior coordinator. And then Sharon on our team is our Spanish speaking food access assistant. Next slide. So perhaps the most important member of our SNAP outreach team is our mascot Logan, who is Sharon's puppy, and he will be help guiding us through the presentation today. We are going to go over SNAP basics, who is eligible, and the life cycle of the application. Next slide, please. So what is SNAP? So SNAP stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and it is our nation's largest federal nutrition program. And it really is our nation's first line of defense against hunger because it provides nutrition benefits directly to food insecure individuals in our country. These benefits are meant to supplement their food costs. They are not meant to be the entire household's food budget for the month. SNAP is a federal entitlement program. That means that if a household qualifies for SNAP, they will receive SNAP benefits, and the federal government has to make that money available for all people who are eligible for SNAP. This makes SNAP a really flexible program that can expand during times of great need, such as it did during the COVID-19 pandemic, when SNAP was able to very effectively and efficiently get benefits to our neediest households in this country. When you are approved for SNAP benefits, the money is placed on an EBT card, which is just like a credit card. It operates the same way. And it will be placed on the credit card, on the EBT card, based on the same day every month. And there is a benefit schedule, and it has to do with the first initial of your last name. So there's a link there to the benefit schedule to see how that staggered schedule of disbursement is. And then if you do not spend all of your SNAP benefits in 1 month, they do roll over to the next month. Next slide, please. So a little bit about how much money a household can expect to receive when they get SNAP benefits. So the minimum for a household of size 1 person is $23. If that one person is age 62 or older, the state of Maryland increases that benefit to $40. And then your benefit will depend on, as Elizabeth will go into later, your income and expenses. But this chart gives you a sense of the maximum monthly benefit for household sizes and what the average monthly benefit is. I think a lot of people are probably aware that during the COVID-19 pandemic, all households on SNAP were receiving the maximum allotment. So they were getting the most money that they could get for their household size, meaning that a household of 1 was receiving $281 a month. And unfortunately, due to the end of federal funds for the COVID-19 pandemic, the emergency allotments ended at the end of the month, February of 2023. So we did see a lot of SNAP households, a lot of people on SNAP individuals going from $281 a month to $23 a month. Next slide, please. So what can you buy with your SNAP benefits? So essentially, SNAP allows you to buy food. So you can buy fruits and vegetables, meats and poultry, dairy products, any kind of breads. You can buy any sort of non-alcoholic beverage, and you can actually buy seeds and plants which produce foods, which is a very little known way that you can use your SNAP benefits. Things that you cannot buy with SNAP, you cannot buy alcohol or tobacco products. You can't buy vitamins or supplements. You can't buy anything that you might need for your household, like toilet paper or anything like that. And then also, unfortunately, you cannot buy hot and prepared foods. So you cannot go to the grocery store and buy a rotisserie chicken because it is a hot and prepared food, whereas you could buy a frozen pizza and that would count for your SNAP benefits. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And we are one of the organizations that do advocacy around changing that rule, but that is the rule as it stands right now. Next slide. So this is just a list of where you can use your SNAP and WIC benefits. We included WIC. We'll be talking about WIC a little bit later. There is a SNAP retail locator linked here. You can use SNAP pretty much anywhere that you can buy food. So that's going to include all your grocery stores, a lot of convenience stores, gas stations, butcher shops. A lot of places take SNAP. You would be surprised at how many places actually take SNAP. There's a very few stocking requirements for SNAP, so a lot of retail locations do become SNAP providers. WIC, however, has much stricter guidelines since it is for pregnant or postpartum women or children. So your WIC locations are going to primarily be grocery stores. You can also use your SNAP and WIC benefits at farmers markets. Included links to information about the WIC Farmers Market Nutrition Program and the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program. And as of just recently, all 50 states in the United States are accepting SNAP online through at least one SNAP online retailer. There's a list of some of the online retailers here in Maryland, and then there is a link to the complete listing of where SNAP can be used online. SNAP Online, you cannot use your benefits to cover any sort of delivery costs, though. Next slide. So we're very fortunate here in Montgomery County to have as many farmers markets as we do. And we're particularly fortunate to have ones that will match SNAP and WIC dollars. So we included a list here of all of the farmers markets that are matching SNAP through the Maryland Market Money Program. And then there are some farmers markets that are doing additional matching funds. For instance, you can match your SNAP funds at the Crossroads Farmers Market up to $50, meaning that if you spend $50 of SNAP at the Crossroads Farmers Market, they will match that up to $50, giving you a $100 benefit. And this is really important now, especially since the emergency allotments have ended. This is really a way to stretch those SNAP dollars as far as you possibly can. Next slide. Oh, and I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Allison. All right, so I'm going to get into the weeds here. We are going to talk about the details related to who is eligible for SNAP and how you can apply for SNAP. Originally we designed this training for staff and volunteers at food assistance providers or other social service agencies who are on the front line, talking to folks who might be interested in SNAP. And these are the details that will be important to have in the back of your mind as you talk to folks so you can help guide them. But the one takeaway for you that I want you to fully embrace in this training is that there is help and assistance for you. This is a very dense presentation. These slides will be available to you. We are here as a resource. So that one takeaway is there is help for you here in assisting people in navigating this process. And then for those of you who might not be on the front lines here, who are joining us because you want to learn generally more about SNAP, I understand the eyes glazing over at some of these very small details, but I think the important takeaway for you here is just how complicated this program is and how difficult and the burden really of maintaining these benefits, I think is something that's really important to keep in mind during your advocacy efforts, and really looking at, why organizations like ours exist in helping folks to navigate this whole process. So with that all said, let's really jump into the details here. We're first going to cover eligibility. So who is eligible for SNAP? And eligibility is based on citizenship status and income for everyone in a household. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, what is a household? And you'll see why this is important in a second. So a household is all people living in the same address who buy and prepare food together. And the important thing to remember here is that you do not get to choose who gets put on a SNAP application. So when somebody is looking to apply for SNAP, they must include all members of their household. That means anyone that they buy and prepare food with who lives in their house. And there are some bright line rules here, but one of the things that you'll note as we go through this presentation is that for every rule, there is an exception or an aside. And so it's important to keep in mind that with every person you encounter who has a question about SNAP, there is a story there, and there are rules that may or may not apply to them. So there is a little bit of a trickiness in trying to navigate this process. One of these bright line rules is that spouses living together must apply together. Another bright line rules, children under 22 who live with their parents must include their parents on their application. So you'll get people who say, I'm living with my parents now, but I am on my own financially. If they're under 22 and still living at home, they have to include their parents on that application. On the flip side, elderly and individuals with disabilities can apply separately, even if they are living with family members. The idea there is that if you're not able to go out and buy and prepare food for yourself and family members are helping you, you should still be able to get your own SNAP benefits without including the rest of the household on there. And then just another critical part of eligibility is citizenship status. So SNAP is available for US citizens and for certain people who are green card holders. So if you are under 18 and you have a green card, you are eligible for SNAP. If you're over 18 and have a green card, you must have had that green card for 5 years before you can apply for SNAP. And then the exception there, as I said, exceptions to all rules. If you are an adult green card holder and you have a disability, that 5-year wait does not apply to you. SNAP is also available to refugees or asylum seekers with status, which means you can't simply apply for asylum. You have to have that court order that says that your status has been granted. And there are also certain rules for individuals from countries such as Cuba, Haiti, Afghanistan. We won't dive into the details there, but just know that citizenship is an important consideration, and that's something that folks should look at when they are applying. It's important to note that just because you have a social security number, if you have like a work visa or temporary protected status, that does not make you eligible for SNAP. Unfortunately, this means that a lot of our county residents who are newcomers or who are undocumented are not eligible. But the thing that is really critical, especially in dealing with these people, is that while you need to have a social security number and you need to have that citizenship status to receive SNAP, you do not have to have it to apply for SNAP. And what that means is that if you have an individual who is undocumented, but their children were born here, that parent can apply for their children and they can have their name on that application. They don't have to supply a social security number just to apply for their children. They do not have to supply documentation of their immigration status in order to apply for their children. So that is a really critical, I think, piece of information to keep in mind when you're talking to people about who might be able to apply. And the other thing that comes up very often in this area is the public charge rule. So we'll cover it quickly here, and we have additional information for you about it. But basically, the public charge rule is a rule that bars citizenships to immigrants who take a advantage of certain public benefit programs. And the reason it comes up so often in the case of SNAP is because during the Trump administration, there were some efforts to make SNAP part of the public charge. And in the Biden administration, they reversed that decision. They made it very clear that SNAP is not considered part of public charge. But you can see where folks might still be very nervous about applying because of the fear that something could happen to their immigration status down the road. The Senate recently advanced a measure to overturn the Biden executive order. And it's, we don't expect that this is going to pass or go anywhere, but it is a sort of tenuous situation because it is dependent on the executive branch to make this determination. So we really advise people right now to apply for SNAP. It is not part of public charge. There are studies done about messaging to address this, where they say we really should be telling folks that this is, something that you should be doing for your family. They advise mentioning names like the Biden administration overturned this, but just know this is always sort of a sensitive issue. And part of this whole process of talking to people about SNAP is really earning their trust and trying to overcome a lot of these fears, which are not unfounded. So you can see it's a tricky process to navigate. We do have some links here to additional reading material. And again, we'll make this information available to you. And then the big one too about eligibility is income. So basically, you have to make less than 130% of the federal poverty limit in order to qualify for SNAP, and that is before taxes, and that is not a lot of money. The reason why the household composition is so important is because they look at the income of the entire household when they're determining this income level. And so you can see where if a student or a young adult is still living with their parents and want to try to apply for themselves and they're under that 22 limit, they would still have to include their parents' income, and that could very likely make them ineligible. We get into a little bit here, we'll talk about it more, what income means, but it's basically any money coming into the household, be it wages, self-employment income, contributions from family members. And you can see this chart on the right-hand side that sort of spells out the limit per month. That gross limit is before taxes. And then there's a separate test. It's a very complicated formula they use to determine income eligibility, but they do take certain deductions to come up with this net amount as well. So it's kind of a two-part test. We tend not to get into it too much with clients in terms of how much they earn and whether that will make them eligible or not, because it's important in our role and in your role in talking to folks never to let on that they will be eligible or that they will receive a certain amount of benefits. And so we provide this information as kind of a guide because it is important for people to use to determine whether the time and effort it takes to apply is worth it to them. And so really this is just sort of a roadmap for figuring out how to go about making that decision. We do have at our disposal this SNAP online pre-screen test. There's a little QR code there if you have the time while I'm talking now and want to click on it and try it out for yourself. It is a number of questions. It brings you through some of the eligibility questions. And at the end, it spits out a little determination for you. It says either, you might be eligible or you might not. It also does spit out a number. And I just want to caution everybody once more, you're never supposed to tell someone that they are eligible or say how much you think they may receive. This is really a determination for DHS. And so we really caution anyone against using that information. It really is more of a determination as to whether you want to take the time and effort to go through it, the process of applying. So how do you apply? This is sort of our next part of the presentation. We want to talk first and foremost about who to call for help, because you're not expected to know all of this information or be able to walk someone seamlessly through the application process. But we will talk about what goes into the application. Again, this is important for everyone to understand. so that you know just how much time and effort is involved in the process. And finally, we'll talk about where you send the application and how you navigate that process, and then what the sort of life cycle of benefits look like after you actually submit that application. So just a little alphabet soup to kick us off. The SNAP program is a federal program, as Allison indicated. It is administered by the Maryland State Department of Human Services. So on the left there, you have their contact number for their customer service line. Wait times there can be a little lengthy. So it is the number that all correspondents sends customers to when they do have a question. But we did also want to highlight that next middle box there, the Office of Eligibility and Support Services. So DHS has local offices all over the state, and those local offices are responsible for actually processing applications, talking to clients about status and that kind of thing. For Montgomery County, that local office is embodied in our county government under the Office of Eligibility and Support Services. So for those of you who were on our food security community call yesterday, you heard from Yvonne and Rodney from that office. We have worked hard to foster a really great relationship with them. They are very generous with their time and sharing with us updates and being available to be at our calls and talk to us. So we're very fortunate to have that relationship with them. They have a separate customer service number. So that's for Montgomery County residents. You see that 240 number there. You usually have to leave a voicemail, but they are good at calling back. And that email address is very helpful as well. So we always, if people have questions about, I applied, but I don't know what happened to my application, we do urge people to call that local number. And not to confuse things anymore, but on that right-hand box, you do see the Connect EBT organization. That is the outside vendor that handles the actual card and the actual money. So if you get people who have benefits who lost their card or have questions about the money on their card, we really need to send them to that EBT vendor. Their 800 number is there, and they also have an online portal where you can set up an account and track your money. So there are quite a few avenues here for seeking help, and sometimes it's a matter of figuring out where the problem is and sending people to the right place. But I also wanted to take a second to talk about SNAP outreach community-based organizations, because this is another great resource for you. If you have someone with a SNAP question, we urge you to take advantage of this resource. So the Montgomery County Food Council, over almost 2 years ago now, became one of these community-based organizations. We and a number of other organizations across the state work in partnership with the Department of Human Services to do SNAP outreach, to provide education on SNAP. We pre-screen residents for eligibility, and we're actually able to submit applications, other recertifications, other paperwork related to SNAP directly into the state system. So that's one level of access that community-based organizations have that is a really great resource for our residents. We are able to track the progress of benefits, and we're able to help in a limited way when there are issues. So we are a great place to call if you're not sure where to send people or they're not sure what their problem is. Usually we're a good first line of defense there. But again, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, CBOs do not determine eligibility. They do not determine the amount of SNAP benefits. We do get a number of calls from individuals who just ask us, can't you just increase my benefits for me? They're too low. And unfortunately, as much as we would love to do that, that is not within our authority. So this is our information here. Again, you'll get this information in the slides. We do have a referral form that you can fill out yourself or on behalf of somebody else. We have a SNAP hotline that you can call, just to note that no live person is going to answer that number, but we do meticulously look for any messages left there and try to get back to people within 1 to 2 business days. You can also email us at the SNAP email address there, or reach us through our website. You can see there Danielle, one of our Vistas, and Sharon at a SNAP outreach event. We are out in the community at schools, health fairs, that kind of thing, trying to get the word out. So be on the lookout for us at your next local resource event. And I did want to point out too, we are not the only ones doing this. We do have 4 other partners in Montgomery County alone who are state-sponsored CBOs, as well as the Montgomery County's navigation team, which is not a CBO, but is equally prepared and able to assist residents, not only with SNAP, but with a myriad of other benefits as well. So we are not the only ones here. We all share in the wealth and work very collaboratively, no competition. So you don't have to contact us. You've got other resources as well. And we've also included a link for all of the CBOs across the state of Maryland in case you ever run into folks in Prince George's County or somewhere else that needs assistance. So just a little bit more on the actual requirements. What is involved in submitting an application? Because this is where we really get into the time tax of applying for federal benefits. I think a lot of organizations think, oh, I'd love to help people sign up for SNAP. Let me just put their name and number and address on this piece of paper, have them sign it and send it their way. And there's a little bit more involved in actually getting a complete application done. So you can see here some of the information that they'll need. Obviously, name, date of birth, social security number, as I mentioned before, for anybody who is going to actually receive the benefits. Citizenship information. You can see how detailed it starts to get. They're going to need their alien ID number if they're a green card holder, and other contact information. Oops. And then again, the other information that is required to process the application is income and household expenses. Again, not to get too into the weeds, but the way that they determine what your SNAP benefit is going to be is based on how much you earn and what your expenses are. And so it is really critical to make sure that all of that information is included in the application as accurately as possible. And sometimes this is really difficult. If you have somebody who is self-employed, and they maybe earn cash and don't have an employer who submits who they get a pay stub from, or they, they just work from intermittently, so they're not receiving a regular paycheck. It can be hard to quantify all of that in the application. And you do have to take into consideration all of these different kinds of employment. Likewise, the expenses that they need to record on their application can get a little tricky as well. So you do need to take into account their rent or mortgage. And then utilities is another expense that almost everybody has. And the utilities are specific. It's gas, electric, water, sewer, trash, and phone. People often ask if they can include their car note or car insurance. And when I say gas, that is gas to heat and cool your home. That is not gasoline for your car. So there are a lot of expenses that people experience that really eat up their household budget and prevent them from having enough money to buy food, that unfortunately we cannot include on the application. That said, a couple things that are important to include are childcare expenses. If you have children in daycare because you are working, then you can claim those childcare expenses. And for adults who are over 60 or individuals with disabilities, you can also include certain medical expenses. And again, the reason that we want to make sure all of those expenses are captured is because those expenses are deducted from the income to determine your ultimate SNAP benefit level. So it really is in a client's best interest to put their best application forward and to include as much information as they can. And the tricky part about this is that the whole process requires verification documents. So in addition to filling out all of this information in the application, they are going to need to submit these documents such as proof of citizenship, pay stubs for the last 30 days, a copy of their lease or mortgage, bank statements, utility bills, that kind of thing. So you can really start to see how this process is time consuming and can be very tricky, especially for individuals who might have difficulty with using the internet or taking screenshots of things, or if they're if they have, again, difficult sort of employment situations. Capturing all of that information in documentation can be difficult. And then once you go through all of that and collect all of that information, submitting the application can be pretty simple if you are able to access MD Think, which is the state online portal. You can do all of that online. You can upload documents. You can then submit that application and get that instant reference number to know that your application has been submitted. If folks are uncomfortable using that, you can fill out a paper application. If you're able to scan that, you can email it directly to OESS. That's another great way of getting those applications in and having that paper trail to show that it's been submitted. And you can also mail paperwork directly to one of the service centers, or drop them off in person. So we've listed those 3 centers that are located in Montgomery County with their offices and everything. And they do really try hard there to make that process of showing up in person run smoothly. We're fortunate enough to have a tour of the Up County Regional Service Center and saw how they are really helping to triage folks. They have a computer lab there to help people if they want to submit it themselves. So there are resources at these centers for our residents to use. Just a quick screenshot there of MD Think. So I mentioned before, this is the online portal that folks can use to submit applications and other recertification paperwork, that kind of thing. There are a lot of videos there that show you how to set up an account. There are some, I think I would say some folks have some issues getting those things set up, and the support there is sometimes difficult to navigate. The only place you really can go for help if you're having MD Think troubles is that DHS call center. And so sometimes that can be a hurdle for folks, but the benefit is if you're able to get into MD Think is that there is a wealth of information there for you. You're able to track the status of your application to some extent. You can see all of the correspondence that DHS is going to mail you. So it's all right in one place, no chance of anything getting lost in the mail. And it is a great way of keeping up with deadlines and things like that. And I'll also say too that while there are some glitches here in the system, that the state is really working hard to improve customer experience there. And so we are hopeful and looking forward to even a more robust portal for folks to use. I will say that this MD Think could be a training unto itself, and we have done that in the past. And it is a great opportunity for those of you in the front line to have a little bit more information to help people, because if they can learn to navigate this system, they really can help themselves a lot more easily. And so just throwing it out there to folks, and especially those of you running volunteer staff or at food assistance providers, if you would like additional information on this, it is a great way to sort of, again, bolster that SNAP education for our clients. So then what happens next? You have submitted that application, and the rest of this is just going to be sort of a little timeline about what happens, the journey of the application once you send it in. Again, if you've submitted that application on MD Think, you will get an electronic receipt for that. If you submit something in person at one of the service centers, they will give you a receipt, and we always urge clients to get that receipt, because some things, sometimes things do get misplaced, and it's always good to have that paper trail. The law states that DHS must act within 30 days on that application. Sometimes that deadline might slip. Oftentimes it's because they are trying to get additional information from clients, and there is a little bit of back and forth there, but generally they act within 30 days. There are circumstances where they can expedite that. So if you run into somebody who is in a critical financial situation, they have no income, they have no other resources, they're not working, Once an application is submitted, within 24 hours, that application will be screened for expedited processing. And if they qualify for that, they could receive emergency SNAP, expedited SNAP, it's called, within 7 days. The important thing to note there is that the application continues to be processed. So that expedited SNAP does only is only for a couple months. And then while the application processing continues, so they still have other requirements. It's just good to know that at least in an emergency, if they need it, that help might be available. But when I say that process continues, I'm talking about the verification of all of the information in that application. Each application is assigned a case manager who will review the information and may request additional documentation. That request will come in the form of a letter. That's why it's so great to have that MD Think access, because then you can see when those things come and respond in that portal. And another important thing to sort of note is that generally processing of the application doesn't happen until they have received income verification. That is the one sort of critical piece of information that they need to move forward to see if somebody is eligible. And so it is really important to have those pay stubs, letters from employers, information like that to accompany the application so that processing can start. The other important part of this application processing is the interview. So this is typically done over the phone. Pre-COVID, they were doing them in person, but I think that it sounds like they are going to stick with this phone process. But you can request an in-person interview. Sometimes that's important if you're dealing with a client who is homeless or doesn't have access to a phone. So that is possible. But it's really critical that this interview process be complete. I see so many applications that get filed, then the client does not connect on that interview and their application is denied. It's important to note that if individuals are over 60 or have a disability, this whole process is streamlined. They don't require an interview. They don't necessarily require the verification documents. So if you are dealing with folks who are seniors or with a disability, this process really becomes a lot more simple. Once that interview happens, once they have all the information they need, the case manager is going to make a determination about that application. You will receive a letter, hopefully approving your benefits. And then within 1 to 2 weeks, you should receive your independence card, that EBT card where the money will be placed. It's important to note that if you have received benefits in the past and they closed and you are reapplying, if you're then approved, they will use that same card. So if folks still have kept that card, it's still good. And just note that it's really important to remember that your benefits are approved for a certain amount of time. So you basically are getting benefits for a year if you're under 60 or you do not have a disability. Over 60 or persons with disabilities are approved for a period of 3 years. And the reason that's important is because after that year, once your benefits begin, you're going to, the countdown starts to your next sort of requirement, your next certification requirement. And that is first, the Maryland Benefit Review Form. Now, I'm going into a lot of detail about all of these different forms and requirements, but that is because it is so critical to keep these things in mind when you're dealing with someone who has benefits. So often we get questions from people who are saying that they had benefits in the past and they just disappeared and they don't know why. And very typically it's because this recertification process did not happen in a timely fashion. So it's really important to clue people in that this is an ongoing sort of vigilant keeping track of your benefit life cycle and where you need to step in and get that paperwork in to keep those benefits going. So the benefit review form is something that will be mailed to them. It's basically a form that includes all of their account information. They basically have to check the box, make sure everything is up to date, and send that back in. They call it a form. It's a little bit confusing because there is no actual blank form that you can fill in. So so clients do have to sort of keep an eye out for what gets mailed to them. They can also contact somebody like a CBO to do that for them. We have access to their information online and can submit all of this stuff for them. So it becomes a lot easier. And so with this Maryland Benefit Review Form, it's a quick check-in. They just have to check the box. Is everything up to date? They don't have to send in any documents or do any kind of interview or anything. And then at the end of their benefit period, that's when they have to submit their redetermination. It's the same kind of thing. They get a package sent to them in the mail. It contains all of their account information. They have to update whatever needs changing, and they have to submit income information at that stage. So the redetermination stage does require that you submit documents, and it does require that you go through an interview. So again, it's a lot of effort to keep these benefits going, and it's really important to educate people on this process that does not stop just because you've submitted an application. The last thing I'll say that's not on here is that if individuals feel that they received a determination that is not correct, either they were inappropriately denied or their benefits were closed and it was a mistake, they do have an opportunity to request a hearing, basically an appeal process. There's a pretty simple form for that. Unfortunately, community-based organizations like us are not allowed to advocate on behalf of our clients, so we're not able to actually submit appeals for folks. And so that's where, if those things come up, we're able to sort of help you all learn a little bit more about that process as well to help folks out. But basically what happens there is that the case is put before an administrative hearing officer. Typically, it never gets that far because if there really was an issue, DHS then takes a closer look and reconsiders the case and may issue a determination before it ever gets there. So oftentimes we are urging clients, if they think a mistake has been made, to submit that appeal in order to get a second look at their case. So that's all of the details you need to know about SNAP. It's probably not, there's tons more, but for now, I think that's enough to get you started. And I will turn it back over to Allison to talk about some other programs that you will definitely be getting some questions on.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and I'm happy to give you a break from speaking and sharing all of that SNAP information. We wanted to make sure that you were aware of the other programs that are directed at food insecure residents, because it is really so important that people are able to access all of the programs and services that are available to them to help them feed their families. So we'll go ahead to the next slide. So first up is WIC. WIC is one of the child nutrition programs. It is something that is similar to SNAP, but of course, because nothing can be simple, it operates in a completely different office than SNAP. And all WIC needs to go through WIC offices. And in Montgomery County, WIC is administered by CCI Health Services, and that link there will take you to the offices. People who are seeking to get WIC benefits need to call the offices, make an appointment, and then they work on the application process with them. So WIC is for women, infants, and children, and it is for any women who are pregnant, postpartum, so that's up to 6 months after birth, and are breastfeeding, and it is up for children up to their 5th birthday. And I just happened to see a question in the chat, if someone can receive WIC and SNAP at the same time. Yes, absolutely, and we highly encourage this. If you are eligible for SNAP, you are then eligible for WIC. There is no citizenship test for WIC like there is for SNAP, and the income guidelines for WIC are actually more lenient than they are for SNAP. So if you know of someone who is on SNAP and they are a woman who is pregnant, or they have a child who is under the age of 5, then they will be eligible for WIC, and you can direct them to one of the CCI Health Services offices so that they can enroll in the program. Next slide. And then there are the school-based programs. You know, it is exceedingly important to make sure that anyone who has a school-age children is filling out their free and reduced meals application. This application not only allows for the household's children to eat free or reduced priced meals at school, but it is also extremely important data that is used by the school district and by the county to understand the need that exists in our county and also qualify certain schools for a variety of wraparound services that they may be entitled to, including perhaps for the whole school to be able to receive free meals, and for the school to not need to be able to fill out the forms. So we always are highly encouraging people to make sure to get those forms filled out. And they can be filled out at any point during the year. They do not have to be done at the beginning of the school year. So the USDA programs that serve kids in schools are the National School Lunch Program, which I think we're all familiar with, the school breakfast program. There's also a special milk program. There are summer meals that we'll talk about in a little bit. There's a smaller program called the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, which operates in schools. And then there is the Child and Adult Care Feeding Program, which we won't get into today, could be its whole other training, but just, there are links to all of those programs there if you'd like to learn a little bit more. Next slide. So you will definitely get questions about pandemic EBT and summer SNAP. We get them all of the time. It is a little complicated, and we've tried to put the information as clearly as possible as we can. Essentially, pandemic EBT or PEBT, P standing for pandemic, started at the pandemic. And this was to help families who had children in school who were no longer in school and no longer getting their free lunch or free breakfast and lunch in schools have money for those meals that they were now missing. So they issued separate cards and they sent them to households where they identified children who were already on farms, and they were loaded with money for them to buy food with. So because of the fact that students have been back in school, we have not been seeing a lot of disbursements of money on these cards. This summer, though, in the state of Maryland, we are approved for summer PEBT. So during the summer, if a student is on farms, they will receive $120 per child. And that will likely be dispersed in 2 installments, one in July, one in August. The deadline to get farms forms in is July 15th. So we really want to encourage people again to get those farms forms in so they could be identified to receive PEBT. There is no PEBT for the school year 22-23, but there is for summer 2023. Now, for children who are under 6 in the child care program, that pandemic EBT has been funded for the school year, but the disbursement will be over the summer. So it will kind of look like a summer PEBT program, but it is really for the school year. Those amounts will differ due to the the calculus that they make based on the proven reduced food access for those children. And then if there are families who have received PEBT, but the family is not on SNAP, they should be encouraged to apply because they might be eligible. Next slide. And then separately, there is a Maryland program, and that's called Summer SNAP. This is a Maryland funded program. And this is money that the state puts aside, and they require the county to match it. So here in Montgomery County in this summer, so summer 2023, eligible students will receive $90 over the summer, and then they'll also receive $10 in December to cover that winter break. But unfortunately, this will not hit every eligible student because there are limited funds for this. The county had to identify the zip codes where there was the highest need and the highest SNAP participation. And these are the zip codes, we've listed them here. This amount, this benefit will go directly onto the household's existing SNAP EBT card. This is different than pandemic EBT. Pandemic EBT benefits go on to that pandemic EBT card, and if a family received pandemic EBT 2 years ago, that it will go onto that card. So if they need to replace their card, then they, on the previous slide, I should have brought this up, then they can go to that website and call the number or fill out a form and request a new card. Additionally, MCPS will be offering meals, on-site meals for children 18 and under who are enrolled in summer school, and the meals must be eaten on site. There is a site locator here that's for the whole state of Maryland, actually, so it's very useful. And there's a link to that there. And then, thankfully, starting next summer, this should all become a lot more simple because there will be a federal summer EBT program, which will be permanent. And that will cover all eligible students effective next summer. So we're really looking forward to that. Next slide. Okay, back to you, Elizabeth.
All right, I'm going to take over. I know that we threw a lot of information at you, but it's important to sort of, have that baseline. And so we just want to throw out some questions. You can test yourself, see how you do. If you feel brave, put those answers in the chat. We'll give you a second to respond to each one. And then after that, we'll turn the recording off and we will open it up for any and all questions that you might have. So this first question, someone comes up to you and says, well, how much am I actually going to get in SNAP benefits? What do you tell them? I'll give you just a moment to think about it. Type away if you feel confident. Any thoughts? And if Allison or Anne-Marie, if you see any brilliant responses in the chat, feel free to shout them out or let me know because I can't see that.
Mary says based on income and expenses.
Yeah.
Cheryl says, I can't tell you that. Cassie says income and household expenses.
All right, we're getting it. We're getting it. So, yeah, so I think you captured it there. Only DHS can tell you what your benefit amount will be. That is the first thing to take away from anything we've said today. But you are correct. Benefits are based on income and expenses for the whole household. Remember that. And also we have that minimum benefit there. Usually if I am talking to someone and they want to know, I'm happy to share with them the minimum and the maximum. I never get into where I think they fall on that scale. Great job. All right, next question. Oops. Can I get SNAP if I have a work visa? Again, we're dealing with so many folks who are not citizens. They might have very different kinds of status within their family. What can you do if you have a work visa? See some folks putting things in the chat, and we'll go ahead and give you the answer there. No, unfortunately, you need to be a US citizen or a green card holder, a refugee or an asylee in order to receive SNAP. But the important takeaway here is you can apply for other household members who meet the citizenship criteria. So that is of utmost importance to us here in Montgomery County. Okay. Next question. I live with my parents. Do I have to include them in my SNAP application? And you might have a different answer depending on who the client is. A little hint there. And just because we're running short on time, we have plenty of time for questions. We'll put in that answer. The answer is no if you are over 21 and you do not buy and prepare food together. So that adult child living in the basement doing their own thing does not have to include their parents. But if you are under 21, you do have, under 22, you do have to include them. I've actually had situations where a woman moved out of the house because she was living with her 21-year-old son who was earning money, and she would not have otherwise qualified for SNAP. The income levels are so low, and it really is heartbreaking to have to talk to these people who are living in the margins and really are not able to afford food for themselves. And yet, you know, some of these restrictions and requirements are really keeping them from accessing SNAP. Next question. I used to have benefits, but they just stopped coming. What happened? None of us have a crystal ball, but I think given what we've talked through today, you might have at least an idea of the kinds of questions to ask, or be able to point folks in the right direction there. Sort of think about what you would say in that situation. And I will just reveal the answers now. Chances are you missed a deadline. It was some kind of recertification form you had to fill out, like a redetermination, like a Maryland benefit review form. DHS could have made a mistake. We see that too. And so we always really urge people to contact OESS if they think a mistake has been made, to see what's going on. The other instance that I didn't really talk about, but DHS has access to payroll and Social Security databases. We see this a lot for our seniors. They will tap into that Social Security database, and if they see a senior has now, you know, because of COLA, received more Social Security that puts them over the limit, they will automatically close benefits. So often that will occur for our seniors, and it's important to give OESS a call and make sure that that's all what is supposed to be happening. I think this is the last question. I submitted an application, but I never heard anything. What do I do? We see this a lot. Mostly it's people who have tried to navigate the MD Think portal, and because of some difficulties there, they think they've submitted something, but they haven't. And what should folks do? This is really the how do I get help question. And this is the one thing I hope that you all have a good answer for after today. We do urge that you call or email the Office of Eligibility or Support Services. You can check that MD Think account. You will see correspondence there if you're able to get access. But then we and other community-based organizations in the county, and I should add other organizations who are not part of the state's program, but who also offer this service, you know, some of the school support staff, some other social service agencies do assist here as well. So reach out to those resources in order to get some help. So I will turn off the recording and